All right, I've spent some time messing around within the Ampero Mini, and it's super powerful, but it's super intuitive, especially when you're using the editor. So one of my favorite things that I think I've found in this editor is how easy it is to reshuffle blocks. And to do that in any one of the presets, you can do manage signal chain. So if you're like me and you kind of have a signal chain you already like, then this is really easy to find that again. I prefer to have a certain amount of gating because these instruments can be pretty fussy, and then I'll have gate, compression, cab, effects. I'll usually just start with a specific IR chain. So the other thing with this is I can put in my own impulse responses, which I did in this case because this is the impulse response that I use for pretty much all of my tones. And it was one made by Chuck Bontrager, who is a really great, amazing electric violinist that's currently doing his doctorate degree in electric violin. So he gave me this IR sample. I think you can get some more from other purveyors. If you have more questions, talk to Electric Violin Shop. They can help you out with that. But an impulse response for me just helps create a little bit more of a body to my tone. I'm going to play it for you in a second, I promise. But then after that, so I usually go gate, compression, impulse response, EQ. That's like my cleanup parameters, just to make sure that whatever effects I'm putting after that have a good baseline, so that I'm not putting a whole bunch of effects over a somewhat janky signal or a signal that I don't particularly like as a baseline. So from there I can get a little more creative. Right now I'm going to show you the Green Drive amp. Obviously this one is based off of the Tube Screamer, which we actually own a version of, so I already know I like that particular pedal. It's a lot, but it makes for a really cool sound later that I'll show you. Right now I'm using their acoustic preamp 1, the AER Colorizer 2 preamp, which the point of this tone is to be just a baseline tone that I can use as a clean tone, or if I'm doing something with like a DJ that I just want it to sound as close to a violin as I possibly can. From there, I've got their analog echo delay and their Izumi reverb. So this whole preset was basically just messed with after one of their factory patches called Zephyr Clean, which was number 3 in here. And as you can see, Zephyr Clean by itself turned it on for a second and went woo, because my presets aren't quite the same setup with that. So I've been messing with it quite a bit, but it was nice to have a good place to start, at least with what they would consider a clean tone, and then mess with it for violin. So we're going to play a little bit of this tone, and then I'm going to start to back off of all of the different effects so you can hear what it sounded like before, and then we'll build it back up. Start with what this sounded like by itself. So we're going to take every single thing out of the effects chain. I've just turned off every single effect. This is the violin just through the tone, inputs and outputs with 0 effects on it at all. So this is what it sounds like just by itself. Not very good. Sounds like a piece of wood with strings on it. And this is what most violins sound like. They're really scratchy. And meh. So the first thing I do is I use a gate so that if I happen to hit the strings, it's going to clamp down on that, and I'm just not going to have a huge amount of tail. So there, I just heard it clamp down. Yay, gates. Next is just compression that I add just to clean it up. You're not going to hear a big difference in tone here. I find it smooths some things out. It just makes the signal a little more consistent because the bow has different speeds, so adding a compressor in for me really helps with that. Next is going to be the cab. Now this is where in Hotone you can put in your own impulse response, which I found just so exciting. So this is with my impulse response, Cousin's Best, that Chuck Bontrager gave to me, and you can put in your own impulse response. But hear the difference in tone it makes from having the impulse response and not having the impulse response. So we see it drops off quite a little bit there, rather than this direct tone. Really loud. When I put in the impulse response, it's going to... Oh, that's why I had the volume turned down. Ha! Put the volume back up, girl. That's why. Here we go. So that's with, and one more time, without. Ouch. So much better. So that just mimics the body of an actual acoustic violin, so you're not just hearing the pickups themselves. So next I'm going to go into EQ, and I usually like to do a parametric EQ. I have a specific technique that I'm happy to show people in a video. It's super nerdy, but it's basically using a visual equalizer software to visually see where there might be peaks in my signal and then use a parametric EQ to tone that down. So I kind of have a sense of where my problem areas are after years of doing this. So I just dialed in my parametric EQ, and I'm pretty happy with how it sounds. Again, I'm usually a little bit more picky with this, but I was sort of moving fast today. A little crispier than I might like, but like I said, I'm pretty picky about that. So I think for a starting point, it still sounds really cool and a great place to start. So last, we're gonna have the acoustic preamp. Again, this is just gonna add a little bit more gain to this tone, and it's gonna compress it a little bit more as well. So now the fun stuff. We've got other amplification that we can use in there, and we've got other effects, but usually in the clean tone, I'm just going to put a reverb on at the very end of the chain, unless I'm doing that in the bigger mixing board, which if I have an audio engineer, usually I'll take the reverb out and let them do it. But if I'm just doing something solo, then I really like to have reverb. It just smooths everything out. I liked the sound of their Izumi reverb in this setting, and I took the tails off because with violin I don't need that many tails. I've got enough sustain that the tails are just going to keep adding on, adding on, adding on. So here it is, full sound, full tone. This is a baseline starting point for what I would consider a really nice clean tone to use on any gig that I'm doing. Then, of course, we can get into all the fun, crazy stuff. The original version of this patch had a really cool phaser on it, so I kept that phaser and an analog echo. So I'm going to turn those on, and so we're going to hear analog echo and a little bit of phase to this. So it's not going to have the reverb. I turned that off, but here's a little bit more of like a spaced out 60s kind of phasey tone. Pièce de resistance, this was super fun, is to turn on that drive. Now I have my drive set before my preamp because I really like it if I have a drive pedal on, unless it's distortion. And overdrives I like before the preamp, distortions I like after. It's just a personal choice. Fuzzes I usually put before the preamp as well, just so that I've got another level of control, since preamps usually have their own EQ built in. So I put the green drive before my preamp here. It's going to get pretty loud, but with the phase delay and reverb, this whole setup together, it sounds super fun and cool. So here it is all together, the very distorted version of this tone. Woo! Turn that down a bit. With the long bus sustain, you can super hear the phaser, which I love to hear that whoa, like how that wave signal happens in a phaser. So phasers and violins I always have a lot of fun with because you can really hear the undulation in the sound. So that's just a little bit of messing around for just a few minutes. I think maybe 15, 20 minutes that I've been messing with this system. So it's super intuitive. I got a sound I really liked pretty much right away. I'm gonna dive deeper and like actually do my deeper process, which I'm happy to show you guys as well. But if you just want to get up and running with the Hotone Ampero Mini, it's super easy. Make sure you have your laptop out. You can absolutely do so much of this inside of the hood. I think from my one little time messing with it, the only thing you can't do inside the box itself, just by tapping through it, that you have to do on the computer, is rearranging your signal chain blocks. I don't think you can do that inside of the box. You have to do it on the app, but the app editor is super intuitive and it was easy to use. So hope you enjoyed that little demo of the Hotone Ampero Mini.